None of us wants to go out and hang out on the Cape Fear River if we know it's full of pig feces and urine. Nobody wants to go fishing with their kids if we know that the fish we catch might have lesions on them from Pfiesteria bacteria. Nobody wants to eat an oyster out of an estuary and have to worry about what kind of infection you're going to get because some hog farm upstream was spraying waste and it was going straight into a ditch and straight into the waterway. We all deserve clean water, and these facilities don't have the right to save money by not treating their waste at our expense, right? This can be done. We can use technology that properly treats waste, and we can protect our drinking water. A CAFO is, the acronym stands for a concentrated animal feeding operation. So what that means is a very large scale farm, what you might call a factory farm, where there are many, many animals confined indoors, frequently inside some kind of confinement cage. They work very hard to portray themselves as, small family farms, green acres style. But when you see these facilities, when you see the size of these facilities, when you look at how many animals are there, when you look at the way that the waste is concentrated in very small areas, it's pretty easy to understand that this is no longer traditional farming. This is industrial scale factory farming. Squeezing every animal possible into the smallest space possible, and it's growing those animals as quickly as possible. As much feed as possible, and anything that can be given to those animals to increase the rate at which they grow and decrease the time it takes to go from little animal to slaughterhouse, that increases your profit. If you can do it 5 times a year instead of 4 times a year, then that's that much more profit.
The numbers have gone up and down a little bit with poultry, mostly up, but with swine they've stabilized at a standing stock of about 10 million head at any one time. The growth cycle for swine is about 6 months long, so North Carolina, when you factor in the mortality, is producing about 18 million hogs per year. In contrast, the state's population is just around 10 million people spread out throughout the entire state. Most hog production is in the eastern, central, coastal plain counties, so it's very, very concentrated. And the consequence of growing a lot of animals that are being fed as much as they can eat in close confinement is you generate a lot of waste. And back around 2000, when the population had stabilized, it was on the order of 15 million tons of raw waste for the whole state per year. So it's a very large number. It dwarfs what humans produce.
Swine waste is a liquid waste that's it washes through slats in the holes of those hog farms, through pipes and into what's called a lagoon, a big open kind of cesspool that is then pumped. The liquid waste in that cesspool is pumped out with these big pumps and sprayed over fields. In the case of poultry litter, that litter is dry, and so it's able to be picked up with big tractors and things like that. It's typically you clean out the barns periodically, you pile the waste up, and you can actually truck that waste around to various places. But the end result is very similar. It's spread over fields, and what happens in both cases is that when you get rain events, the waste, either the liquid hog waste or the dry chicken litter or chicken waste, winds up washing off of those fields into the ditches that usually kind of intersect those fields and into small streams and then larger streams and eventually into the Cape Fear River. September 1st, 2016, we're in Duplin County off of Highway 11 at a hog farm. We've had a flood advisory issued from Duplin County. The North Carolina CAFO general permit states that Land application of waste shall cease within 4 hours of the time that the National Weather Service issues a hurricane warning, tropical storm warning, or flood watch associated with a tropical system, including a hurricane. As you can see, this is a spray field. They're in the process of spraying right now. It is 3:04 on September 1st. Here's today's paper. Star News out of Wilmington. This is a violation of the North Carolina General Permit for swine. You know, I've had volunteers out with me, and we're taking these samples, and we get back to the lab, and we get our results back from the lab, and we find out that we've been basically walking in open sewers. You know, that the bacteria count and the waterways that we've been walking in and taking samples were just like you'd expect to see if you went down to a wastewater treatment plant and you sampled the pre-treatment areas. I mean, just astronomical levels of bacteria that are going right into our streams, which are going right into our rivers. And, you know, I still fish a little bit in the Cape Fear River. But I certainly, you know, wouldn't eat those fish anymore. I'd still like to have my kids swimming in the river, but, you know, they don't swim in the river right now. So.
Well, right now we're just kind of just doing a very preliminary sample in an area where we think we could be seeing runoff from a poultry litter field. And so a similar situation with poultry waste as you have with swine waste. You know, it's spread out on the landscape. And then when it rains, it runs off and gets into waterways. And so this is just a very, very preliminary test just to see if we see anything that seems out of the ordinary.
As I heard the stories about, you know, people literally living next door and having this waste, I mean, raw feces and urine below from the sprinklers on a windy day, you know, right onto their house. I had heard stories about people that couldn't have a birthday party for their kids because, you know, they can't have the kids outside when the sprinklers are blowing on them. And, you know, I have now myself driven down a number of North Carolina back roads when these sprinklers are going and watched this stuff land on my windshield, and thought to myself, you know, at least I'm in my car. It could be that I was right next door in a house. If people living in these urban centers were forced to deal with the same thing that people out in rural North Carolina were forced to deal with, I think we would see very quickly some changes made. But because these are kind of out of sight, out of mind, because they're placed in areas where the people who are most affected by them have very little political voice, that's why we're still seeing expansions of the CAFO industry. That's why we're seeing a real reluctance by the state to do anything about CAFOs, to regulate CAFOs at all. And the people that do deal with that in rural counties like Duplin County, Sampson County, you know, they are in very bad situations. They frequently cannot leave. It's not like they can just pack up and go someplace else. They were frequently there before the farms came, and their property has been devalued because of these farms, and they just don't have a lot of options, and they're just kind of forced to live with these things, kind of a prisoner of these CAFOs and a prisoner on their own property.
When I'm in my kitchen in the evenings, when they clean out the house over here, they have bright lights on and a big 18-wheeler, and they'll bring out the cages crammed full of birds, and then they stack them until they get so many high, and then I see the forklift coming over and lifting up the batches of birds and putting them on the back of the truck. And then when they're leaving, all the screaming that goes on and the feathers flying down the road as they drive off.
If you look at the number of farms across North Carolina in the last 50 years, the number of farms has plummeted and the number of animals has skyrocketed. it's just a matter of regulating these enormous farms to the point where other small farms can actually compete, and you can actually go out to the store and buy some chicken or a steak or a pork chop and feel pretty good that it's not coming, on the backs of the environment or family farmers. We need to be thinking every day about ways to protect our water, our surface water, our groundwater, and we can only do that by taking a hard look at the leading polluters of our waterways. And in North Carolina, especially in the Cape Fear River Basin, that's CAFOs.